Welcome, Ben. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. It's a really good turnout. So, thank you. Welcome. So, it talks about 25 minutes. So, there'll be time after if there's like a question or not or whatever happens, but that's the program. So my name's Pieter Van Winkle, and many of you I know, a couple of you I don't. I'm really glad to meet you. And hey, Neil, come on in. And I'm a soul-centric facilitator and a men's embodiment leader. And basically what I do is work with men. I mean, I work with women too, and I work with couples, but really I love working with men and getting men into their bodies, into their souls, and into their service in the world. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is men. So, yeah. And I'll share more about myself later on. So, the cold open. Men are suffering. And, I feel like a lot of the sort of, when we think about men having a hard time or the problem with men in the world, we think about sort of structural and personal abuses of power and violence by men of power and privilege, right? And we think more of the sort of impact of that, but we don't often think about the behind the scenes. And there are stats that can sort of point us in that direction. 70% of homeless people are men. Men die by suicide at a rate 3.5 times that of women. And we've had 106 mass shootings in America since 1981, 102 committed by men. I can relate to the depression and the anxiety that men experience that leads to those kinds of situations. For years, I struggled with depression and anxiety. But it's tough to get a kind of handle on depression statistics because, the sort of code amongst men is not to kind of reach out. And so it's really tough. And so all we have are these sort of top-level indicators. So what I want to talk about is kind of what's behind that, the reason I think that is. And what it is that men have a kind of obsolete OS, kind of obsolete operating system. And we have two choices as men, to upgrade and evolve or not. And if you're here tonight, I'm imagining that you, like me, have kind of had it with the latter camp, right? And the culture is kind of developing these antibodies to deal with that camp, right? Me Too, feminist movement, social justice, a whole host of things. But really what I'm interested in, and what I imagine you're interested in, is men who are up for evolving, up for changing that from the inside. Right? And what I really want you to walk out of here tonight is just a really clear idea of why this exists on the inside for men. A couple action items as men in the room and as people who support and love men that you can do to bring this out, and then a sense that you have the resources and support you need to do that. Okay. So, my story. So, when I was 12 years old, my parents were divorced. I was living at my dad's house, and my cousin lived next door. And I looked up to him so much. He was a few years older, and he came over with his friend, and wanted to go out and play. And so I ran up the stairs to ask my dad, and I stopped on the landing halfway up, and I yelled up, "Daddy, Daddy!" Just sort of so out in my innocence, and I happened to look back down through the slats of the door of the stairs, and my cousin goes to his friend, "Daddy." And it just it was so foreign. There was no defense for it, right? There was nothing between me and this new information that just came. And I just was so embarrassed. I was so withered. I never called my father Daddy again. It was over. Right? Dad from here on So I was raised in Connecticut, in New England, in a kind of place that was pretty image conscious. Try to sort of speed through this. When I was 8, my parents were fighting all the time and struggling in their relationship, and I was acting out in school and was diagnosed with ADD and given Ritalin to take 3 times a day. And the sort of transmission that came in with that was something like, there's something wrong with you, right? It has nothing to do with what you might be experiencing. And so there was this kind of like, again, no defenses, right? And I took that with me. And I tried to fight it, and I tried to fight the system, but it's really hard as a little boy, as a little kid, as a little human to fight against the system. And I took it through grade school, I took it through high school, I took it to college, I took it to the corporate world. And the question gnawing at me was like, how can I be me? But I have to make sure that I'm okay with the world, because I have to make sure people are happy. And for me, it was my dad. And I came to this choice point where I was offered a job that was tantamount to selling my soul in this corporate job. It was like, here's the promotion. I didn't take it, and sort of started trying to figure out who I was. And what I found pretty quickly was that I was stuck. And the reason I was stuck was that I no longer had the culture's definition of who I was and what I was and how I had to show up. But I hadn't yet developed kind of my authentic. It didn't prove to be super easy to just go, okay, screw you guys. I'm just going to sell this. The world wasn't necessarily, it wasn't easy to figure out how that worked. I imagine a lot of people can relate to something like that in here. And as I started to figure out that I was stuck, and the way you find out that you're stuck is you start to press against it, right? Like you start to want more. And I started to realize that I was kind of stuck in 3 main ways. And I met 3 men in myself that I want to introduce you to. And these men are kind of the infrastructure for what I'm calling Man OS, sort of jokingly, right? Like the infrastructure of what it is to be a man. Right? And what I want you to notice as I introduce these to you is that they're all sort of designed to protect me from something. They all seem to be wrapped around a kind of shame experience. And the mechanism for that protection is sort of frozenness and resistance to change. So the first guy is static man. Static. Frozen. Right? This guy is going to keep me safe by making sure that I don't experience anything in my body that is going to hurt me or put me in vulnerability. And so it's literally a kind of walking dead in the body. But it goes further than that. I don't have access to intuition in the body. I don't trust my body. And I actually had a bunch of sexual hang-ups and sort of shame around touch. I felt toxic, like if somebody wanted to cuddle or somebody wanted to cuddle, thanks Dave, I felt like, don't touch me. Right? And I didn't know how to release into my body. So, next guy was stoic man. Right? So stoic man is disconnected from the heart. And stoic man is really going to keep me safe by making sure that I remain emotionally unexpressed. Because those sort of flights of fancy and anything exuberant or overly joyful or with too much power or just anything communicating the sense that I'm in my experience, no. Right? And then the last guy is strong man. Right? And strong man he's the lone wolf. He's the one I'm independent. I can handle it. I got this. And anything that's going to smack of me not, I'm going to get rid of that. And this is really a disconnection from my mind, because now I'm working for these loops of comparison and competition and criticism in my brain. And I'm a sort of, this is the place of narratives. Right? So So there you have it, right? Man OS. I'm kind of stuck. So I want you to flash back, if you will, back to that boy on the stairs, on the landing of the stairs, right? So it's like, Daddy! Daddy! And I see that, and it comes into the body, every cell, into the heart. Don't do that. Don't be whatever that was. Mm-hmm. And it comes into the brain. Oh, okay. I got the memo. I get what we're doing here. I get what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I got the memo. I downloaded the OS. Okay? There were more moments, and I'm sure a lot of men can relate to that, and women, and people of all genders can relate to similar places, because this really isn't about gender. It's deeper than gender. This comes from a system of domination, exploitation, and extraction that manifests in certain ways. But it can't exist without this sort of column of men's internalized oppression. Yeah, so I needed an upgrade, and I was struggling. And I discovered 3 practices, sort of stumbled upon these practices that I sort of found by pushing against the ways I was stuck in order to find more of my agency. Because that's really what it's about, right? It's about authentic agency, being able to be a point of authority in the world that isn't externally referencing and also isn't embodying a narrative that I didn't invent, that doesn't authentically sprout from my being. Does that make sense? And so the first practice, embodiment, right? So this is starting to chunk up the ice, baby. Starting to break it up. Starting to let it go, right? And I actually, at this point, had developed a psychosomatic knee injury, right? I was in my head about my body to the point where I actually got surgery on a knee to fix something that at one point had a physical symptom, but, you know. And I was so disconnected, and I had shame around that, and I had shame in the body, and I didn't know how to just relax into the body and open and go, whoa, this is way not about my knees. This is like about my cells waking up and about pleasure and about how energy moves through the body and how emotions travel. And being able to, find for me, not for performance, for me. And so one thing you can do, if you're curious to try this out tonight or tomorrow, and go play a song, pick a song that makes you angry or makes you happy or makes you sad, and put it on, and then just breathe. And, move your body parts. Your knees, your sacks, pelvis, your stomach, and just track all the way through your body parts, your neck and your head. And just have that experience of reawakening the body. So the next medicine is relational medicine. And for men, being sort of clear about our experience in the presence of another man is really challenging. Like, it's really hard to be like, I'm angry, I'm pissed, I'm sad, because we're so used to keeping that locked up. And you see the way one of the ways it manifests in the culture, right? We never have our experience that's sort of unlinked to another person. I remember, this is a sort of silly story, but I was living with this family and they practice NVC, and I was wrestling with their 9-year-old, and she sort of spilled out of the pile and started crying, and I was like, oh, I just hurt their daughter. And she starts crying, and I was like, and then she started laughing, and I was like, you made me feel guilty. And she looks me square in the eyes and goes, I didn't make you feel anything. You know what I mean? So the ability to have my experience and have it be independent of your experience, then opens up the ability to be curious about your experience. Well, I am experiencing anger. What's it like being you? Well, I'm pissed. I have room for that. I'm really sad. I have room for that. You know? I'm turned on. I'm attracted to you. All right. I got room for that. You know what I mean? All those kinds of things. And so the action for that is to just, with a friend, just say, fill in the sentence stem. One thing, the truth of my heart is. Next time. Okay, so lastly, the practice of community and gathering. And I just want to really, again, thank you all for coming tonight. This feels so good that people care about men finding a way to get back together. I have worked with men for probably 10 years, and one of the most difficult things is just getting us together. Getting us together because we have so much in this community mind center of like, well, if I go and hang out with you, then that means that you're in charge of me. Or that means that you're the boss man. Or that means that I'm weak. So I don't want to show up for that thing. And so it's almost like we have no way to gather. We have all this technology and all this sort of resources, but it's very difficult for us to get together, I think, as North American men. And so, and gathering together and reaching out for help undoes that lone wolf narrative, that lone wolf story, right? That I am alone, and that, which is super toxic and super hard to get around. So, bringing it to a close, bringing it home right now. Thanks for sticking with me. Doing this work rocks the boat, right? It rocks the boat personally, and it rocks the boat structurally, communally. And it rocks the boat because, like I said earlier, that sort of system of domination, extraction, exploitation that brings us those holiday hits like racism and climate change and classism and capitalism, like I said, requires this column of manism. And in order to, and we can deal with it with Me Too, and we can deal with it with all these things, but I think we really got to have men get inside that and begin to gather, learn a literacy of the heart, learn a fluidity of the body, and do it together, and don't be afraid of being seen while doing it, to grieve together, to have fucking anger together, to have so much participation and permission. And so if that's something that interests you, as a man or as someone who loves men, and you want to do that with other men, let's have a conversation, because that's what I'm doing. If you want someone to walk alongside you in that, or just want somebody to support you in that, let's have a conversation. And so, there was a time, I used to work with a teacher, and something he said, his name is Martin Partel, and he said, humans aren't here to succeed. They're here to fail beautifully at attempting to feed that which feeds them. So I don't think that our job is to succeed. I think that our job as men is to kind of find a way to go back to that time when men were real protectors in their heart, when men were not just interested in the sort of, family and job and neighborhood, but cared about the health of the forests, and cared about the health of the elk, and cared about the rivers, and cared about the pollution in the soil. And we were about it together, and nobody would fuck with those guys because they were the mafia of that place, of the world. And now we're living scared in our own bodies, and it doesn't have to be that way.